ladies and gentlemen, friendly reminder, I'm recording by the way, I will let you know about Thursday's test. Like I said, I honestly think I will be here. Coordinating that many people on a short clock is very difficult. So I think the funeral will be in January. So with that being said, we are moving and marching forward to a Thursday test, 25 questions, all multiple choice. All makeup work needs to be done by Friday. If you are testing, it needs to be done by Thursday because I will not be here. This is your last week of content. Next week we're in review. Then we have exams, and then we don't see each other for 2 whole weeks. Oh, are we not excited about that? I'm very excited, and I am ready to be done with you. With love. Not really, actually. I'm just ready to be done. Okay. So with that being said, today we are discussing the difference between a president and a parliamentary system. How pumped are we? God. Literally not a single response. Not a single one. You couldn't give me, girl, a help. Right on the top of your notes, week 16, please, to keep everything organized. When we go back and review things, everything is crystal clear and tied to our scope and sequence. All right, it's political system. So the first one we are doing is parliamentary system. I would write down this lovely definition, and I will even let you do it in silence. Isn't that nice? As I'm talking through your silence. Ooh. So you're writing down this definition, and we'll go through and kind of clarify. The big goal of today is the difference between a parliamentary system and a presidential system. Okay, so you are writing down a system of democratic governance of a state where the executive derives democratic legitimacy from its ability to command the confidence of the legislator. Okay, underline confidence, because that is going to come back a couple times. Typically a parliament, and it's also had accountable to that parliament. Now, of course, you have a highlighter on your desk, because you need to have a highlighter for comparative, because we're always constantly comparing. Okay, are we done with the definition?
No.
So cranky. Did we have a good time? Anna, you worked hard on homecoming. Did you have a good time?
Yeah, I'll show you the lessons 360 video.
Oh my god, how cute. But people have been super positive about it. Are you happy with it?
Yeah, and we only went for 30 minutes.
I can't. You people are idiots. Collectively.
No, it was fun. It was just really hot. Like the dance floor was
You people. Alright, so your parliamentary system. There's a couple things you have to know. First of all, the major country example is UK. Write it down and put a highlighter on it. The major country, when we talk parliamentary procedures, it's UK, not England. Why can't we say England, McCormick?
Because that's like the whole, the United Kingdom is like
the whole entity. There you go. England is just a specific state. It's like saying Florida represents all the United States. Is that true? No. We're like the laughing stock. What?
You said the underlying confidence.
Yes. We'll get there in a sec. Okay. So, put a big star. The legislator and the executive overlap. Write that down. The legislator and the executive overlap. And I would underline overlap. The prime minister, write this down, put a star next to it, is appointed by the legislator. The prime minister is appointed by the legislator. Okay? So, are the people voting for prime minister? No. The people vote for your legislators, and then those legislators vote for the prime minister. Okay? So, parliamentary system. They also have a thing called a no vote of confidence. Write it down. A no vote of confidence. A vote of no confidence, sorry. A vote of no confidence. A vote of no confidence is when the legislator believes the prime minister is too weak and they remove him. Vote of no confidence is when the legislator believes the prime minister is too weak and they remove them from power.
Like actually 2 weeks.
Yeah, like they can't gather political support. It happens pretty frequently. Note that. It's not common, but it's not uncommon. Does that make sense? It's like hearing the Kardashians do something stupid. It's not every day, and it's not all the time, but they do it. What?
Do prime ministers also have term limits, or is
No.
it only-
You can be a prime minister for as long as you have the confidence and the party support. So that's the big difference. So, right now, in the UK, they have a brand new prime minister. The day before the Queen died, she met her 16th prime minister, some crazy number. The day before, the Queen dies the next day. That chick led England for a total of 42 days. And then she got hit with a vote of no confidence, and she got sent home.
When the Queen died.
Well, 42 days. She died the day after she got appointed prime minister and met the Queen. So she was in charge for 42 days, messed up their entire economy, and she got vote of no confidence out. So she got removed from power. Okay? Then they voted in the current dude, who is pretty cool. He is the youngest prime minister in the history of England. He's also the first of Indian descent, which is pretty cool. He also has the worst job in the world right now because England's economy is really, really terrible, and they've had a whole lot of other domestic problems as well. So not a great spot, but apparently he's pretty well liked in England right now. And I can't think of his name at the moment. It will come to you. So a vote of no confidence means the legislator votes you out. A vote of confidence gets you into the prime ministership. Okay? So you get a vote of confidence, and that's what promotes you to prime minister. You get a vote of no confidence that votes you out. The biggest thing, if you're going to learn one thing today about a prime minister, is that they overlap. The legislator selects the executive, who is the prime minister. There's no separation of powers. Write that down. There is no separation of powers. And the majority party selects the prime minister. The majority party selects the prime minister. So, if you are just a British citizen, have you ever voted for a prime minister before in your life?
No.
No, and you will never vote for a prime minister. You will vote for a representative to parliament, and once they get into parliament, their peers will vote them to prime minister. The people of the UK do not vote directly for prime minister. They vote for representation to parliament, and then inside parliament, they then push someone with a vote of confidence to prime minister. Ben.
So can a prime minister be anyone, or does that have to be someone in parliament?
It has to be someone in parliament. You can't become named for it until you go through parliament. Lilith.
So if the people didn't like the prime minister, they would
No.
have changed the legislature?
Yeah. They would have to vote the majority party out. Paula, I see you. Thanks. So, it's a majority party. So, if we hate the prime minister and that taints the way we feel about the party, then the next time we vote for our representatives in parliament, we would vote out the party. And then that new party that would come in would then promote a prime minister of their own. So we are not British. We do not have a parliament. So when I say we, I am completely lying to you. The British people, if they don't like what's happening in parliament, they have to wait for the next election of legislators. And then from that, they can then push the change from a very bottom level.
I thought you just said that if they don't like what's happening in
which basically means
The
a vote of no
legislators
confidence.
has the vote of no confidence. Now, as the public, can we have a public outcry saying Andreas sucks as our prime minister? Yes. And can we rally support around the idea like Andreas is the worst prime minister we've ever had? And will that change the opinion of our legislators to a degree if the public outcry is that harsh? Yes. But there's nothing the public can personally do to get you out of office if you're a prime minister. Does that make sense? The only people who can get you in and out of office is the legislator. Unlike the United States in our presidential, who puts a president in power? The people do. I directly cast a ballot to vote for my president. Now, does it mean that I voted for them? No, because there's winners and losers in a democracy. But I put a ballot in, and it gets counted to either to support the person. Meriwether.
So do prime ministers not run for election?
No, they run for confidence, as in they try to do public service to keep their peers and the legislator happy. Okay, so, the presidential system. Skip a space, center it, presidential system. Write down this definition, please. So there are pros and cons to both of these systems. The prime ministership has a more cohesive government. Why is it cohesive? You already know the answer because I taught you parliament. Why do they have a more cohesive government? Come on now, Adam.
Because the majority parties generally hold everything.
There you go. The majority party holds the executive and the legislator. So whatever the prime minister wants is going to be pushed through the parliament unless they're unpopular. In a democracy where we have a president, how's that going? Yeah, Biden did have all three. How much did he get done? Not a ton, because he didn't have a dramatic majority in either of the houses. And now he's lost the House. So how much power is Biden really going to have? Not that much. I mean, they can still get a little bit done. And then tomorrow is the last election of the midterms. Georgia is voting tomorrow officially for Warnock versus Herschel Walker. So that election is tomorrow, which aren't we glad to finally get a resolution of that chaos?
Yeah.
Oh my God, what?
Are we waiting on this to see who wins?
Who wins the Senate?
Yeah.
So it's either tied or the Democrats are gonna win. What do you got?
Isn't the president the head of state behind Congress?
It depends. Luke,
Everything's how it is.
we already, yes, but it's gonna, do we have a majority or is, no, it's the Senate, they're caught.
Well, don't they have the majority because they already reached 50 anyway?
They already have 50, but if they have 51, then everything they can do passes. Or it goes back to a tiebreaker of having the vice president vote. You don't have, the vice president very rarely in history votes. Like, it's like not a thing. It's not a great idea on either party really wants the tiebreaker to be the vice president, because the vice president is just supposed to supervise. The Congress is not supposed to be active participant, but if there's the tiebreaker, that's not really how you want to run the system. Does that make sense? Okay. Presidential system. It's a form of government in which the head of state, head of government, president leads the executive branch, and they are separate from the legislative. So put a star. Your examples that need to be highlighted are Nigeria and Mexico. I would also put parentheses and write the United States. But should you highlight the United States? No, because they're not one and the same. Okay? So, Nigeria and Mexico are your two examples of presidential systems. Okay, put a star. The executive and the legislative branches are separate but equal. Write it down. The legislative branch and the executive branch are separate and equal. This is the opposite of
Parliament.
Parliament. Parliament, they overlap. So this is unique to it. The president, write this down, is directly elected by the people. The president is directly elected by the people. Okay? So when you turn 18, the first time you vote for a president, that is directly counted into putting someone in office. Okay, so it's a direct election. In a parliament, there is no direct elections because who puts people into the prime ministership? The legislators. So we vote for, we don't vote. The UK votes for legislators, and those legislators then vote for a prime minister. Okay, next thing you need to know is that the president can be more influenced than a prime minister. A president is more likely to be influenced by others than a prime minister. Why? Think about it logically, it makes sense. Nothing is illogical about it. Nick?
Because they're voted in by the people.
Okay, they're voted in by the people, so they're going to be much more attuned to the whim of what people want. Why, Lilith?
They serve in terms, so if they want to get reelected.
There you go. Okay? They have to keep election in mind while a prime minister is appointed until they lose confidence. Okay? So, a president has to keep electability in mind. So there are some things our presidents do that make them more electable, right? Joe Biden, for instance, thought that by doing student loan forgiveness would make him more popular, more electable. And it worked out for him because the midterms, they really didn't lose that much. So there's obviously multiple layers to it, but maybe that did help him pull through. Does a prime minister have to worry about electability? No, because once they have the job, they have it until they lose it. Okay? So, put a star.
That's just like
There are term limits to a president. There are no term limits to a prime minister. Now, if the majority party in a prime ministership loses an election, who loses their job? Yeah, so are they still tied to elections? Yeah, they are. But as long as the majority party is in power and they're still being an effective leader, they still get their job.
But like they have to keep electability or just like.
Well, yeah, but
they
it's
have to
not
keep
as...
influence in mind no matter what.
There's a very famous comment by Obama. He got hot mic'd, okay? So he was sitting down in a press conference with Putin right before his second election. And he was sitting there with Putin, and they did a panel in front of a bunch of journalists. And Obama thought his mic had been turned off, and it wasn't. And he goes up to Putin, and they shake hands to show diplomacy. And Putin asks him a question, and you can't really hear what the question was. And Obama responds, I can't do anything about this topic until I get through my election, which was like one of the few scandals of Obama's presidency, because it showed that he was putting his own electability over the stability of the West. And that was one big concern and one big scandal of it, that he wasn't willing to sit down at the table with Putin and come up with an agreement because he wanted to be elected again. That is something a president has to deal with, but a prime minister doesn't directly. Does that make sense?
What do the legislators do besides like?
Pass laws. Yeah, they're the ones passing all the laws and doing all the domestic stuff. Okay, so the presidential system. Now, of course, we do have a majority, minority, and all that stuff here in our country, but it has less effect on the actual presidency, correct? Okay, separation of powers is a huge thing you do need to know. Okay, and then we have a semi-presidential system. This is the definition I do need you to have. In case you didn't know, what country is it going to be the example? Russia. Hmm?
Said Mother Russia.
Yes, Lilith. Sorry, I was laughing. I didn't see your hand. What?
India is also.
I am not 100% because it's not one of my 7 countries. No, it's not.
Oh yeah, it's Iran, not India.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think it's just a prime minister. Okay. when we talk about former colonies of England, most of them are going to be parliamentary, except for two, the United States and Nigeria. And the reason is the United States bails really quickly, right? The first colonies are here in 1517, loosely tied because transportation issues, all that stuff, and we bail in 1776 and become our own country, right as England is starting to really bear the force of their governments on people. Keep in mind, in the 1770s to the 1830s, that's when England creates the empire that the sun never sets on. They're going to have those colonies for 100 plus years that are going to be forced into the governance structure of a parliamentary system. So we had very loose government control because it was so hard to enforce, being thousands of miles away with less technology. By the time the British start their colonizing imperialist empire, they have the technology and the domineerance and the naval support to back it up. So their footprint is significantly heavier in these colonial countries rather than in England, in the United States. With that being said, Nigeria is the only weird one that kind of breaks away really, really sharply. They have a unique history with England, which we'll get to when we study them. So, Jamaica, what type of government structure do they have? They have a parliamentary because they're a former colony of the UK. I almost said England. I almost said it. Okay? When we talk about South Africa, what system do they have? Parliamentary. It's a good rule of thumb. There's two big exclusions, the United States and Nigeria, and that's really how it goes. All right. So, for your semi-presidential system, the example is Russia. Of your 7, the example is Russia. A couple big things you have to know. It has both, and I think it's important to explicitly write, both a president and a prime minister. The president is outward facing. Write it down. Which means they deal with what? If they're outward facing, they're dealing with foreign diplomacy mostly. The prime minister is inward facing, aka domestic. So, in a semi-presidential system, you have a president that faces outward, which is why we call Russia President Putin is who we see as head of government because he's the outward-facing leader of the country. Okay, there is a bit of a ranking system between it. Who do you think has more power, the president or the prime minister? President has more power because they're more influential on the world stage than the prime minister of the country. Now, you need to put a little star, not popular. Why isn't this a popular structure? Think about it logically. There's a president and a prime minister. Why don't we think this is particularly popular, Matthew?
Creates conflict.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflict. When you have two men, and it's only ever been two men with big egos who are running the country at the same time with different positions but different pull, how well do you think it typically goes long term? Here in the United States, we have a president and a vice president who has hilariously less responsibilities. The vice president historically has like no responsibilities, and really they're just going along and just like clapping behind the president. That's like their job. It doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Kamala, whether it's Joe Biden under Obama, they literally just walk around and clap. Can we agree? Pence was doing the same thing. Because we didn't want our executive to have internal competition. This creates internal competition, which is why it's not particularly popular, and goes like that. Okay, so a couple things you do need to know. We've already kind of covered this, so you don't have to write everything down, people. But parliamentary system is UK. You need to know that it's the legislator that controls everything in a parliamentary system. Now, people vote for their legislators, but it's the legislators who control both the executive branch and the legislative branch. In a presidential system, it is the people who control the executive branch And it's the people who vote in the legislators, separate but equal. If you only know one thing for a presidential system, it's separate but equal, and a parliamentary is layered. And then you have your semi-presidential. Okay? It is two opposite-facing positions. Outward would be your president, inward is your prime minister. And it's not particularly popular.
So,
What?
when you mean two opposite facing positions, what if the president and the prime minister have common beliefs?
They should, but they're not voted in at the same time. It's not like you vote on one ticket. You can have Andreas and Nick on one, and Steffi and Lily on another. You typically have one voted in via one election, and then 2 years later you vote in the prime minister if you voted in the president 2 years later. So they're not necessarily friends or commutative equals.
Does the president stay as long as the prime minister?
They have their own set components. There's term limits because they do elections for both of them. All right, here we go.
Didn't do elections.
They do elections. They just stuff the ballot boxes. Okay? Yeah, they lie through them. It's like a complete scam. And think about it. Do you think today in 2022, Putin is listening to his prime minister? No. He's not listening to his prime minister. He's created quite the autocratic. What do you got, Luke? I believe so. I believe they are, and that's where my little gap of knowledge would be. Yeah. It's the president who nominates a prime minister. So technically by nominating a president, you typically nominate a prime minister. Okay, so presidential. So big thing. So presidential versus parliament. Those are the big comparisons. You cannot do well on the AP comparative exam without knowing the difference between them. Okay, I don't need you to copy down this whole chart. I really don't. But I need you to have under president, separation of powers, under parliament, layered. Okay? Under president, directly voted by the people. Under president, right? Directly voted by the people. Under parliament, elected by the legislator. Directly elected is your president. Parliament, it's legislators elect. Okay, you need to know the president is head of the government, state, and military. So that's something new. We haven't talked about that. The president is head of the government, the state, and the military. Okay. On here it says president, head of state. I don't want you to think of it like that. They typically have some sort of royal family that's head of state. Well, that's what you didn't listen to the first part. They typically have royalty as head of state. And then they have the prime minister as head of government. Which one has more authority? Government. Okay, head of government has more authority because they're the ones who can actually change laws. So let's talk UK. Who is the head of state with a hand? Who's the head of state, Meriwether? King Charles is your head of state. What can King Charles actually do, Pierce? No, he literally can't do like anything. He can spend a lot of money, and he's really good at it. Him and his family have been doing it for hundreds of years. They're really good at spending money. They're really good at pulling attention to certain things they care about. They can open parliament, but they can't like do anything in parliament. And they're mostly there for the ceremony. They are the cultural unifiers of England. That's what a state leader does. They're the cultural unification. A head of government is actually in charge of the laws and bills going through Congress, going through the legislator. You didn't know the difference? You should probably write that down. It seems pretty damn important. Can't we agree? So the head of state is the cultural unifier.
In the parliament?
in a parliamentary system, or even here in the United States, okay, the head of state is supposed to be the cultural unifier. Someone that everyone can identify with as being an epitome of their cultural values, right? Now, here in the United States, you may not like it, but when you see an American president, you're like, yep, that's an American president right there, right? They have our similar beliefs. They talk about going to get a beer with them, yeah? That's how we approach our politics in America. Would you get a beer with them and sit down and have a conversation? Can you talk about the bills on the kitchen table with them and all that type of approachment, okay? A head of government is someone who is actually doing the work of the country, passing laws. Now, this is not a great way to think about it, but I want you to think about it this way. We are not a parliamentary system, we have a president. But who would be the prime minister if we had a semi-presidential system? Who would be the prime minister in our semi-presidential system? By the way, we are not a semi-presidential system, but who would be? Ethan? Huh? No, she wouldn't be. Who would be our prime minister? Aiden? Chuck Schumer, because he is the head of the Senate. He is elected by his peers. Yes, the majority parties get to vote who is the majority leader of their house. Yes. The Republicans are having a hell of a time doing it right now. And if they can't come up to a vote here before January, the Democrats get to pick their leader. Isn't that a funny kick to the shins? Like, they're having a huge problem getting one of their people through with a majority because they're very fragmented right now, the Republicans. And if they can't get their shit together here very soon, the Democrats will pick someone. Who would they pick? It'd be wild. It would be wild. Okay? Nancy Pelosi, who used to be the majority leader of the House, has obviously stepped down. I don't know if she's retiring or just stepping down from House leadership. She has now been replaced by a minority leader. It's the youngest ever to be a minority leader, and he's also the first black leadership position in the House. So that's a big deal. But with that being said, Schumer would be our prime minister because he's appointed by his peers. Everyone clear? Okay. When we talk of a parliamentary system, underneath that column, you need to know it's a unified system. A unified system under parliamentary. Why is it a unified system, Andrew? If it's in parliament, why is it a unified system? Well, think about it. If it's a presidential system, it can be fragmented. Why can a presidential, think about the United States, why can that be fragmented?
What's fragmented?
Broken up. No. Scout, why is parliamentary a unified system? There you go. The prime minister is appointed by the majority party. The majority party is in power, so the prime minister is part of the party in power. So whatever the prime minister does, it's probably going to happen, yes? A presidential system is a fragmented system. Why? Who can pull it through? Lily? Different political parties can hold each of the branches, yes? Okay, the Democrats can control the presidency. However, they may not control the House. And that causes a fragment. What do you got, Ethan?
How often do they have elections for the parliament?
How often? Okay, it depends on each country. And I think it's every 4 years for England. But when we get to England, we will absolutely know that. When we get to the UK, Ethan, we will officially know. How much time do I have? 2 minutes? Nice. Okay. So, parliamentary powers. Okay? Actually, let's start that tomorrow. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Perfect. So, do we feel like we have a pretty good understanding of the difference? Are you just saying that so I shut up? Thank you. Okay. There are pros and cons to each. Can we agree? And a parliamentary government